Good morning and welcome everybody who's watching this video. This is supposed to be the keynote speech for the icup2020 conference, International Conference on Urban Planning, titled World Resilient City. I'm Lorenzo Chelleri. I'm the chair of the Urban Resilient Research Network, and I'm delighted and honored to have been invited to deliver this keynote and share my thoughts and opinion about city resilience and urban resilience. So thanks for inviting me to the scientific committee and organizational committee. What I would like to briefly do today is sharing with you within this title my critical understanding about urban resilience, wondering whether it's still worth talking about resilient and city today after a decade of emerging criticisms and evolution of the disciplines. So let me argue why, mainly among us, among planners, could be worth or not talking about urban resilience nowadays. So there are three premises I would like to share. And these three premises are about why being skeptic about resilience in cities. So let me show you three main points that we've all seen through the literature and discussions and conferences and workshops being debated these last years. So the first point is that we all know resilience is quite not a clear concept, but fuzzy, blurry, and highly multidisciplinary and having a highly metaphorical value, right? So under the metaphor of being adaptable, right? Different disciplines and different projects suggested quite a variety of resilience implementation. So from one side, resilience be used in policy discourses, and from the other, implementation sometimes driven by political wills or inertia or previous experience or different interests, just legitimize a variety of outcomes. So there is this first premise about resilience being not able to clearly drive implementation by being too metaphorical. And there is a second assumption linked to that, built around a lot of case studies and evidences in these last years or decades, which is this overlapping between resilience, social justice, and sustainability. And just going straight towards social justice, we've seen many claiming about resilience being used or manipulated as a concept to justify projects which has been inducing gentrification or social injustice. And this is the famous flyer which was occupying most of the walls in New Orleans, clearly stating that the community didn't want to be named as a resilient community. And as Tom Slatter, I put here a quote from his blog, an early one, which was actually claiming that resilience linked to the neoliberal capitalism was not a positive concept to follow, saying that the ability to deal with change and continue to develop is a perfect framework for powerful actors, because it doesn't imply any power relationship change, right? So this has been one of the not use but maybe abuse of resilience. And linked to that, there is the tensions between resilience and sustainability. We all know that the new urban agenda, as the SDG, as many document or political framework, has been using almost overlapping resilient and sustainability, assuming that by being resilient will be sustainable. And as I've pasted here from a really insightful paper just published in Nature last year from colleagues exploring the concepts of sustainability and resilience in the light of transformation and evolutionary pattern. As you can see, they show how there are very different patterns of transformation or evolution that could or not be linked to sustainability, but each of those can have more or less degree of resiliency through this evolution. So let's just imagine how how many examples we have around the world of coping with climate change, so building adaptive practices, or building resilience through drought or flooding with solutions, which has been tackling those issues, so being resilient, but at the expenses of sustainability because of the energy consumption or the environmental impact of this infrastructure. So there is this more and more agreed concern about resilient sustainability that would need to be coupled, but they're not always coupled. And the third point, which maybe is the most blurry, but it's one of the most problematic to us planner, since resilience is about a system, right? An ecosystem or a bridge or whatever, a system which we want to analyze and understand the structure, functioning of the system, even identity, as the scholar from social ecological system thinking illustrates. And in our case, when we address cities, or better say urban systems, it's quite challenging to define the boundary, the structure, the function, and the dynamic of what an urban system is nowadays, right? And so we as planner has been always struggling to define city and urban system. And as like I just quote Saskia says that urban systems are the most transformative ever incomplete system. So it's quite difficult to relate characteristic of resilience and define resilience of what to what beyond a specific risk, tackling the whole urban system, and driving actions and implementation about how to make this hyper complex adaptive system resilient, right? And this is because all the layers, networks, subsystems coexisting within what we call urban systems that make us that contribute to make challenge to define what need to be resilience to what, and thus without entering in much more complexity, just put here two quotes highlighting this complexity about overlapping resiliencies within a system, and making clear that each community must deal with the management of multiple and different exposure, multiple and different threats, right? And thus there could be emerging trade-off among those threats and among different resilience strategy, and how one community and one scale acting against threats and adapting could imply directly or indirectly the increase of the exposure or sensitivity to another threat at another scale or to another group. And these kind of assumptions recently in the last 5 years contribute to what's known as the theory of resilience trade-offs, and how we need to manage resilience, because there is just no one resilience that you can implement for the whole city or urban scale, right? So because of the three premises and discussions in the last 10 years, if you ask me if it is still worth navigating and exploring urban resilience nowadays, well, maybe my first answer will be not anymore. We've been talking a lot about resilience. There are dozens of papers criticizing resilience, and I guess that these three main points make the assumptions of urban resilience theory and implementation quite clear. However, we're here, and I would like to share with you my few points about why I see a turning point here today because of COVID, not because of the COVID recovery. So let me argue that and be very clear about this cautionary note. I'm not saying that nowadays something is changing because of the COVID and suddenly we need to adapt to it. Therefore, it's clear the mission of urban resilience. I'm not saying that. I'd like to argue now through two main points why I see that something in changing that contributes to, make resilience to be maybe redeemed. So let me argue why I think so. And these are the two main points I would like to explore with you. So the first one is about changing the potential for transformations. And the second one is about the changing conditions, about how we relate and how resilience relates to uncertainty. So let me show you my thinking. The first one about why I like to focus on transformation, being one of the point where, to me, resilience gets stuck, right? So we saw an evolution in resilient thinking and urban resilience up to these points in which we saw that resilience got stuck. So if you look to the evolution of the literature from many different fields, you can see that there is a common thread, right? There's a common pattern. From disaster resilience, we've seen how many scholars has been pointing out the need of better linking disaster recovery, reconstruction, but then long-term sustainability. So there has been this discourse around the need of thinking about how to transform and build back better or safer toward mitigating the threat. So with this necessary link with sustainability, and I put here just one of the many resources you can read and find arguing that need. And the same happen if you go in detail about specific aspects of disaster resilience, like in the case of Asprona et al., looking at the critical infrastructure. The same call for better bridging resilience and sustainability, and thus transformation. The same for climate resilience literature, which in the last decade has been pushing for better understanding and aligning what is climate adaptation and mitigation, standing for resilience and sustainability transformation, right? Or the very same fathers of resilient thinking, the social ecological system perspective, which already in 2010, Carl was asking for integrating transformation on lower scale to allow bigger scales evolution. So again, another call for linking better resilience and transformation towards sustainability. And our self-planners has been, since the very beginning of the most interesting discussion about how to link resilient and city, led by Davoudi, for example, in 2012 with the paper Evolutionary Resilience. There has been this call toward transformation, linking resilience to something beyond bouncing back. So this just to say that there is all a bunch of literature that has been exploring the meaning of resilience beyond just recovery and bouncing back to the previous states, and calling to how to bounce forward to a new equilibrium and towards sustainability. So knowing this from the literature, let's explore what has been happening looking to the practices. And we can see the same. Like the practices, there are many papers. I'll pick up here just two from US and Europe. I'd like to see more papers like those in future, hopefully. So the first one is by Sarah Miro and a colleague, published in 2016, and look into how more than 100 city practitioners officials across US understand the meaning of resilience, respect to bouncing back or forward. And as you can see in 2017, most of the answers were around bouncing back and robustness and protect the system. But then in a more recent study, as you can see, without looking into the details, just a trend, many more answers around bouncing forward or transformation emerge. And the same happened in Europe. It's a paper we just published about, again, hundreds of interviews and surveys around the meaning and perspective on urban resilience in Europe, both looking to scholars and practitioners. Here, we're interested mainly about practitioners now. And as you can see, there is just less than a 10% of respondents which are linking resilience to bouncing back. Most of them are just linking resilience to bouncing forward, so to transform the system. Or more than a half understand nowadays resilience as being both about bouncing back and forward, so combining that. So this is quite interesting because it poses the challenge about how we're implementing something which is both about bouncing back and forward, about building robustness and transformation, right? And this, let me show you just two insights about which are those challenges, justifying what I'm saying, that to me, resilience has been stuck at a certain point when we understood that it is about transformation. we get stuck there, because as you can see here by these answers to the question about which are the barriers to reconcile or to manage, bouncing back and forward perspective, most of the respondents just said that the challenges are political. You can see political agenda, high interconnectedness, and scale dependency or lack of incentives, adopted transformative pathway. This is the most of the reasons about why resilience fails to embrace transformation, because of the political agenda and the dependencies across scale, which is reinforcing my third point about the introduction, which is understanding the complexity of urban system. And now in practices, there are challenges about coordinating different scales and having integrated implementation of resilience. And this is also, of course, aligned with the latest theoretical advances about urban resilience implementation. This is a paper by John Coffey about the policy challenge and research at the agenda for the 21st century about urban resilience implementation. And as you can see from the three main points here, it is all about, so all the barriers are about institutional logic, bureaucratic routines, institutional practices. So there is this inertia and this lack of ability and capacity to embrace transformation. So this would be my first point, arguing that resilience has been evolving toward transformation, but gets stuck there when we need to implement transformation. It's one of the first assumptions that we can do, right? So we failed to meet the target, the implementation target about implementing urban resilience toward transformation. But the second point is about uncertainty. And why is uncertainty important? Well, it's important because we've been used to work with resilience quite in silos. So if we pick resilience to flooding, to earthquake, to infrastructure, building and management, or to determine shocks like flooding or sea level rise, we've done quite a good job in terms of having tool, assessment framework, and then projects. Where we're not good is when we have complex or unexpected issues, like in the case of Cape Town, unexpected and quite long drought, which now is hopefully gone, but is overlapping with pandemic. So imagine what happens if you have an unexpected and long drought in a timing when you need water for hand washing or hygiene standard or whatever. So we're quite not so good to manage unexpected things, and thus build resilience respect to something we cannot handle because we don't know how to control the situation. And so this is the second point where we hit our heads when we need to think about resilience evolution, right? Mainly through climate emergency, we've seen that we fail to enhance our coping or adaptive capacity in general term, right? So not just thinking about one stress or one risk. So what's changed now? Because at the end, the aim of this presentation was arguing that maybe resilience could be redeemed, right? So looking around us, we've seen happening many things quite unexpected. And I would like to explore this with you a moment. And I've here synthesized just three main points. We've seen a shift from office to home office, where we're seeing a massive substitution of ICT for physical movement, of course. We're not traveling anymore. We're reducing our mobility patterns and behave. And there is this shift from big city centers, or I would argue also peripheries, towards small towns, or at least I guess that people now are sprawling through the territory and the regions and not then obliged to stay and surrounding a city center where you need to commute for going to work, right? And so thinking about these three trends that have been characterized in this last year and still nowadays are reshaping our life in reality. I love that quote from a very recent paper published by Chelleri about the pandemic key trends are something that we already seen more than a decade ago. And thinking about what's happening, I'd like to recall what Graham already published almost 20 years ago about the death of distance, which was something related to the rise of the internet. So already more than 20 years ago, there has been papers arguing and theories arguing that thanks to the internet, there could have been a dissolution of cities, the extensible individual, much reduced mobility, physical networking will be substituted by the virtual. All this expectation by the internet, and we have been, living within Skype or all kind of technology allowing us to reduce our mobility until now that the COVID is obliging us to use those technology which are already available. That implies that the pandemic and the COVID is really not offering us all the solution, but it's just a trigger for transformation, right? And to make sense of some technologies that we've been having around. So, and this is happening at a scale which is quite impressive, because it's not just about us in Spain or whatever, a nation or a city, but it's just a global transformation happening. And here are linked what just been published even by big banks. So the Dutch bank actually just published a quite long-term assessment return study, wondering whether we are entering a new era in which we're loosening the globalization after 2 waves of globalization. As you can see here, navigating the transformational pattern of our global economy, they're kind of forecasting that now we could be losing the globalization and entering something they call age of disorder, which I guess that they're calling disorder because I have no idea about what's happening, but for sure there is a reshaping of all our global dynamic and global network towards something which is more mixed toward the local or glocal or whatever could be named. This is something that should make us think about the role of resilience within all of this, right? And this would be my key 2 assumption about how to rethink resilience. So the transformation we're seeing happening around us, to me, is shaping 2 changes. Thinking about transformation, what we've seen as a pre-COVID scenario, right? Change was kind of resisted, right? Or impeded by our lobbies or behave or inertia of living. And as we've exploring through some slide, also because of the institutional behave or unable to embrace change, even as you can see by the picture, even when we embraced renewable, so new technology and this kind of transformation and transition, there was a kind of resistance and being linked to this centralized approach of big infrastructure, delivery of the services, and not embrace really a transformative changes toward decentralizing or distributing the infrastructure. This happened and was a pre-COVID scenario. What we are seeing now is actually quite the same. We're seeing a lot of autonomous adaptations happening, people leaving the cities, changing behaviors in terms of mobility, but also in terms of infrastructure. There has been this call and implementation of kind self-sufficiency driven infrastructure and behavior. We're getting small and local and better connected through short circuits, right? So this is a trend that to me is quite significant in terms of shaping a transformation which is not on paper, but is just happening, it's riding us nowadays. And respect to uncertainty, also let's get these transition from pre-COVID to post or during COVID still scenario. So pre-COVID, there was kind of still this pushback of people or the community respect to embrace uncertainty and build skills and capacities as a mean of resilience. Mainly if you think about that, because the climate impacts or the risks have been always jeopardized through the territory or the groups, right? And thus the people has been always feeling distant or not responsible to the causes or contributing to the solution. Something which has been completely changed now. During COVID, indeed, you feel this kind of engagement within the solutions and the causes, because the virus is spreading through us and our behavior. And so both the risk and the solutions are really happening within the individual level, right? So notwithstanding the risk now is clear and it is one, there is a kind of sort of uncertainty with respect to what's happening or what will be happening, that contributes to make us think about how we can increase our adaptive capacity in general to deal with these stressful situations, how to better cooperate among each other, how to be better networked, how to be better informed, how to be better, linked with local services, not just health services. And so we could see this kind of building generic resilient skills, even if thinking about COVID, but then developing through all sets of resilient characteristics, let's say. And so let's try to frame it a bit, and thinking about these three premises, and back to our original question, whether we said that resilience being too metaphorical, not aligned with sustainability or justice, not embracing the complexity of urban system. Well, let's get back to these hypotheses and think about the first one. What we'll see now actually is that by reacting to COVID, we're actually increasing self-sufficiency, decentralization, redundancy, the local social capital, learning capacities and skills. So there is this kind of empowerment of citizens and communities. And we could say actually that we are seeing now more resilience principle happening and driving the transformation around us, like self-sufficiency and decentralization and redundancy, right? So it starts being quite principle-driven, what we're seeing happening, and rather not metaphorical, right, in terms of adaptive capacity to COVID. But when we look to sustainability of justice, well, in terms of sustainability, there has been also quite impressive trend toward recognizing how important the role and the exposure to green and nature is, especially during lockdowns. We've seen many studies arguing that exposure to nature and green was key for mental health. And simultaneously, beyond just the mental health, we've seen that the decreasing carbon footprint and emission because of the reduced mobility is actually inspiring a new relationship with nature, and leaving the city and going living in the surrounding towns or villages is also called and a manifestation of this need of being more in touch with nature of the people. And when we're thinking about the justice, also all the adaptation to COVID, spontaneous adaptation, there is this movement about claiming for the city quality of life and quality of the built environment. And so a lot of claiming about family work balance, access to services and internet connection because of the home schooling and home working, and people claiming about the public spaces which should be enhanced and quality of homes, etc., etc. So within the adaptation to COVID, there has been also all this claiming and this increased attention toward justice and not just sustainability. And last but not least, when we think about urban systems, indeed, while thinking about resilience in the last decade, I would say that most of the programs and institutional implementation of resilience has been happening in district or city level because led by administration. When looking to what's happening now through the COVID experience and adaptation, we're actually seeing this territorial approach to resilience and people moving within region and rescuing small towns and changing land uses, and I would say putting again values to the heritage and cultural heritage. And so by redefining completely the mobility or land uses, or thinking just about US cities where people used to sleep in certain areas and then going downtown just to work, there's a complete now opportunity for reframing this land use planning and behave right across the territory. So I would say that now there is kind of reframing of our relationship within the region. So we're kind of redefining what is a city and what is actually urban living within a territory, right? And all this is happening under the adaptation, either individual or groups or community, family or city adaptation to COVID. And that's basically why I think that if a year ago before pandemic, I would definitely say, no, it's not worth talking about resilience. Now I think that these three premises could be now again interesting because rather than being metaphorical, now we're seeing that resilience is kind of pushed and driven by those principles about self-sufficiency, diversity, decentralized approach. So quite interesting to further explore again what's happening and see whether there is actually the potential for resilience to drive transformation. And so explore again all these principles. What we've seen is linked to sustainability and justice, as said. And also, where since that resilience is embracing the war complexity and actually discussing about what is a city and what is an urban system and redefining, contributing to redefining it. So I guess that because of that, so not because just of the COVID and the need of recover our economy or bouncing back, but because of these trends that I've just explored with you, I think that nowadays maybe we should be again interested in looking critically to how resilience is embraced both transformation and embracing uncertainty, and how we're building resilience to the uncertainty of don't knowing what will be happening to our economy, society, or cities because of this long-term stress, right? So these were my main point, and one I think that it could be still worth talking about urban resilience nowadays. Happy to chat over the discussion of this keynote, and to whom could be interested and just look in the video and know at the conference, just very happy to receive any feedback through my email address. So thank you very much to allow me to share with you my thinking, and keep in touch.